doing this, like at the very
Yeah.
end.
You weren't a kid. That's an awesome walk-on song.
I mean, right? Happy darn CultureCast day. Oops, I love it so much I started again. Derek, happy darn CultureCast. Welcome, Derek Lundsten.
Thank you. It's great to be with you.
Oh my gosh, so great to be with you. And yes, we were just chatting about this walk-on song. I think I do this every time. First of all, thank you to Julius Wilder, who created and produced this here in Nashville. And I cannot help but move. I mean, that bass is so good, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Seriously. Well, anyway, welcome, welcome, welcome. I'm super excited to have this very special friend and guest, Derek Lundsten, who, before we jump into LifeGuides, who is like the guru on thriving in life. I feel like we were meant to be friends because
Yes.
it just so speaks to why I do what I do for a living and why I live every day. It's all about making sure that people are part of communities, environments where they can thrive.
Yes.
And I think that's why LifeGuides so speaks to me. But before we get into that, I want to get into Derek.
Yeah.
So, who was Derek growing up, and what led you to this path of starting this company?
Yeah.
Go
So
anywhere you want.
I love the question. So, and I speak about this sometimes, that I was a philosopher and a spiritual seeker first before I ever got into business. And so at a really young age, literally about 7 years old, I can remember vividly asking myself or asking God, like, why am I here? Right.
Wow.
Legitimately. It was really young. And like that, for me, that was something that I was seeking or building, or, whatever you want to call it, from that time forward. And then, when I got into school, I went to James Madison University, and I studied psychology and I studied philosophy specifically. And I was really drawn into existential philosophy and Eastern philosophies, particularly Buddhism. And there was the idea of the Bodhisattva path, that there are people who are here helping others on their journey, was something that really resonated with me. And when I met years later, after I got into entrepreneurship and business, years later, I met through a entrepreneurial group, my business partner, and he shared this idea. And in the business plan, there was this note about the Bodhisattva, and it literally lit me up in that moment, and brought me back to that point in my life of just, why am I here, and what are we doing here? And it felt clear that was part of the venture and the business that I was meant to be a part of. So, but I was like every other kid, right? I was, in the sense, that was a key part, but otherwise, I was curious and loved people and liked to have fun and explore different interests. And that desire to connect with people and that desire for adventure is something else that always was with me growing up, and has been with me as through my life and my career. So it was really the intersection.
Interesting.
Of aspect for me.
Yeah. I mean, I'm really curious at 7 years old, when you asked the question, why am I here?
Yeah.
What did you declare out loud or say to yourself when, you started pondering and reflecting on that question?
Yeah. I mean, the simple answer is I didn't have a good answer, right? It was
Okay.
actually more of a frustration moment, where it was like, why? It was like this awareness of like being in physical space and time, right? Being in the world, being there, and just this, like, I don't know what to call it, just the recognition of just life around me, right? And said, okay, this is what am I here to do? And then part of it was just about the experience of that, right? It was just almost at a young age, like, okay, I'm on a journey. I can choose different things. I can experience different things. I can learn different things. I can influence different things. And so it became just that awareness, and that influenced how I've done life, for lack of a better term.
Yeah, I feel like every leader and human being that I've met, where thriving and heart is really at the front of, or the center of, what they do.
Yeah.
I think that vision comes early, and I know that you were still pondering that, at 7.
Yeah.
I feel like it's those formative years. People that I've met, it's around 7, 8, 9, where people might go back and say, I really had this thought that maybe I might be leading down a pathway. And I love that you use the word self-awareness and just creating awareness around you.
Yes.
I resonate with that. I think about growing up in Southern California and being first generation, and then moving from LA to not LA, which is the suburbs,
Yeah.
and kids just making fun because we were different. And I think back then I was just so highly attuned and aware of just what was happening, like how people treated each other, what lifted people up, what didn't, that kind of thing. So I feel you when you say that.
Yeah, you were sensitive, right? You were sensitive to the environment, sensitive to the energy of people, right?
Always,
Yeah,
always sensitive to the energy of people. And so it's fascinating because you had kind of the spiritual guide,
yeah,
you had a business partner, but then I look at your background and you've definitely been an entrepreneur, a tech entrepreneur.
yes.
So what led you to that?
So coming up back, continuing on that journey. So
Yeah.
in my mid teens, late teens, I started to become more aware of business as a concept, right?
Okay.
Broadly, like just out, it was out there, and also because it was back to just the idea of creation and just what was being built. I always had this desire then to go build and be an entrepreneur. I remember talking to some of my family, in my late teens, like I want to be an entrepreneur, and that was prior to the entrepreneurial explosion of what is today,
Right.
right? So, and they were encouraging me, right? I don't come from a family of entrepreneurs per se, right? But
Okay.
it was an inherent desire to go to do that. And then when I was in school, again, I was studying. I was like, I studied philosophy and psychology. I don't want to become a doctor or a doctorate of psychology or
Hmm.
philosophy. I'm not going to become a lawyer. I'm not going to go do that. So I was like, what am I going to do? I'm going to go into business, right? I saw that again, that love for people and that connection of somebody
Yeah.
who's into business. And I ended up working with or for different entrepreneurs. And so I was able to learn in those experiences. And then over time, again, just the dots connecting from one venture to the next and one
Yeah.
entrepreneurial mentor to the next. Eventually it led me on my own path where I was like, I'm going to go do this. I'm going to launch on my own and start my own business and businesses. And then that kind of just continued to spawn them. Right. And so I've now done a bunch of different entrepreneurial ventures, some more successful than others and others that have not worked out. And I've learned a ton of lessons along the way of that.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, that's been part of it. It's been wild. And then technology and healthcare, for whatever reason, has been a key intersection of what I've always been drawn to. Right.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, I see that, but I'm also hearing the whole backed with philosophy.
Yes.
And, that's very strong. And I'll say a spirituality,
Yeah.
behind that. Because I see that
Yeah.
technology meets healthcare, meets life sciences. I can see
Yes.
that too, in terms of your background and how that creates a beautiful combination for setting the stage for being an empath, right? And
Yes.
supporting people. And
Yes.
so say more about that. I mean, I know that early days, I'm surprised because I think back in the day, it's not like
Yeah.
kids said, I'm going to grow up to be an entrepreneur,
No.
right? So when you were studying philosophy,
Yeah.
was there an entrepreneurial mentor somewhere? Was there, or is it just kind of a thing you fell into?
No, it was more my inner knowing, my inner
Inner
wisdom
knowing.
on the entrepreneurial side in particular. And in fact, I remember, back to early days at that point, to be an entrepreneur was truly about creating a novel idea, right?
Yeah.
Like it was all about product creation. You had to build come up with an amazing idea that was going to change the world. And that is a form of entrepreneurship, but it was through that philosophical kind of unlayering, for lack of a better term, that I started to see entrepreneurship much broader, right? That
Yeah.
it was about connecting, to your point. It was about finding ideas. It was about facilitating relationships. It was about, tapping into other skills that I had. And to your point, and it sounds like we shared this,
Yeah.
I was very kind of attuned or aware of what other people's experiences were of the world around us and how we'd interact with one another. And that I learned over time that there was a skill in that, right? That
Absolutely.
empathy, that empathic sense, allowed me to connect and understand things almost on a unspoken level, right? And it would allowed me to see connections between people or connections between ideas or between possibilities that maybe some other people didn't observe or notice. And so I started to practice that, for lack of a better term.
I
Like,
love that. No, I mean, I think that's why I just feel you every time I
yeah,
have a conversation with you.
yes,
Um, although I know I've gone down a very different path, I think the alignment really is I've always been curious about experiences, right? Not only my
Yeah.
own experience, my family's experience, moving from one, the city to not the city, and the stark differences in how people treated each other.
Yeah.
Um, I'm the classic, my parents raised me to be a doctor kind of
Oh,
person,
yeah.
right? And I was a biology major when I started. And I remember I'm like, I don't want to do this. But if I look back at what really drove me, and I feel like my entire life I've been observing people and feeling experiences and
Mm,
was so obsessed with not only doing well in school, because that's what my parents told me to do, but that whole experience of being in school. So, for example, high school,
yeah.
I wanted to make sure that this was the best experience, whether I was on student council, I was a cheerleader, joined every club. And I was just curious about the experience that we were creating for everyone so that everyone can, not only get through school, but actually enjoy it. And so I think about that
Yes.
and making those connections. And so I think this leads me to, your natural ability to create culture.
Mm,
When I was thinking about what am I going to say about you, introducing that we're going to have this conversation. And I think it starts with that core that you're already talking about spiritually,
yeah.
emotionally. We are the culture that we create. So
Yes.
how we show up really does impact the world around us, right? The people around us and the world around us. But I'd love for you to talk about when you think about the word culture,
Yes.
how would you define it?
Thank you for that
Yeah,
question, and thank you for the kind words and just the invitation again to be here with you. So it's fun because my title technically is President and Chief Culture Officer at
I
LifeGuides,
know. I love it.
and we've made that with an intentional decision because it goes back to your point. It's about there's an intentionality that we create together, and that can quote unquote a container of an enterprise or a business or organization. But culture for me really is about how we show up as individuals, as
Mhm.
that collective group of individuals for that common purpose, those shared values, that shared mission, that shared vision, whatever it is that we're building together, and the way that we do our lives and live together, that is the formation, the environment of culture. That's what I believe. I mean, I know you and I are kindred spirits in this regard.
Yeah.
We talked about it, but it is very much how you live and how you interact with your friends and colleagues, and those that are close to you in your life. That is the definition of culture, and that continues to magnify and expand out from that one little idea of an entrepreneurial venture into society at large. And there's
Right.
subcultures, as we know, within those different pieces. And it all comes back to what is the intention? What are we sewing together? What are we weaving together, right? As part
Yeah.
of that, as part of that collective experience. And how does each individual node or individual, perspective, how does that contribute to the greater purpose,
Yeah.
right?
I love that. No, I love it's like how we roll.
Yes.
You're
How
talking
we
about
roll.
how do we roll? Not
Yes.
only self roll, meaning like being highly aware
Yes.
of, I mean, this is what I'm getting from you, like fully being in tune with who you are, what you're all about as an individual, right? Like starting with that and having clarity around that,
Yes.
right? Then bringing that into the world, whether it's one other person in the room,
Yeah.
1,000, a million other people in the environment, that
Yes.
how you show up really does impact how other people may respond to you,
Yeah.
right?
And to your point about empathy and
Yeah,
seeing the people, it's like, who are you, right? Who's Marisa? Who is
yeah,
that other person? Like, who are you at a core deep level? Like, who are you at your soul level? Who are you? What do you value? What matters, right?
yeah.
So that's all part of it.
I totally agree. And I think it's that self work and that self awareness. Again, I'm going to bring that up because you were highly self aware or creating that awareness at 7 years old. And of course, evolve that throughout your life. But I think it starts with, as you talk about culture, most people go, well, okay, here's our purpose and values. Let's all live it. But
Yes.
I think it's, I said this on LinkedIn in a different way, but, when I think about Ice Cube, it's like checking yourself, right? Really understanding where all this idea, emotion comes from,
Mm.
and being really clear about that.
Yeah. It's about presence,
Yeah,
right?
it's presence. And I love this internal kind of fortitude and celebration of a person
Mm.
starts with that, right? I think we're getting deep on culture, but
I
I
love
love
it.
that it's you that I get to talk with you about this. And so, LifeGuides,
Yeah.
what a wild idea. So, I'd love for you to jump into this auspicious, maybe it's not auspicious, this vision that you have
Yeah.
to impact a billion people.
Yes. So this goes back to the shared co-creation of ideas, of
Okay.
collective
Yeah.
consciousness and wisdom, right? So I was in it was about 8 years ago. I was in Peter Diamandis's what is now mastermind called Abundance 360. Singularity University is now the sponsor of that. But it was 360 entrepreneurs in Los Angeles, and we were talking about technologies, artificial intelligence, robotics, longevity, all these things that
Yeah.
we're hearing a lot about now in the collective consciousness about innovation. We were talking about these things almost 10 years ago, right? As things that were forming and going to impact the future.
Yes.
And um, Mark, my business partner, and I both had the shared awareness that we were saying, hey, we're talking about things that are going to change the world through technology. What is going to stay the same? Like, what is it? What about humanity is unique and special that's kind of transcended through all iterations of technological innovation so far, and will be the case, you know, following this next leapfrog of technology and
Yeah.
innovation. And we both had this realization. It's about human connection, right? It's
Yes.
about wisdom sharing. It's about our stories. It's about our unique experiences. It's about what makes us us individually and as a species, right? And said, okay, well, you think back to the idea of before when we lived in tribes, literally in villages, back to that concept, and
Yep.
we would interact with one another. We'd share our stories. We'd share our resources. We'd share our wisdom. We'd come together in those moments of struggle and support one another, and we'd also help to learn through each other. We said,
Yeah.
okay, we live in a world where there's literally 8 billion people around the world that are, if you look at that in that context, we can now attribute and get to the idea of finding perfect matches and connections for people in different experiences in different circumstances, right? And so the one idea that we were talking about at the time was around caregiving for
Yeah.
dementia loved ones, because Mark had that experience. I had seen that experience secondhand through my grandparents and my parents, and said, okay, there's something here. And what we saw was the idea that if you talk to someone who'd been in that situation themselves and had navigated it successfully,
Yes.
they had learned certain lessons, they had learned certain emotions, they had experienced and been present all that. And then the question is, but why? Right? Aside from the fact that it builds that individual's character, they're meant to share it. They're meant to pass it along. That's why we experience it.
Yeah.
To tell the story and to share the lessons so that other people can do it better, do it more efficiently, do it more healthily, and then continue onward. That's how we learn and evolve,
That's
right?
right.
And so what we said was we can build a platform that facilitates that. We can build a platform that people who have lived life can connect with other people going through that same challenge or same moment, and they can be a guide. They can be a peer. They can help someone on their journey of life through the lessons that they've learned. And what we saw, this was 7 years ago, is that this would be a massive transformative experience for mental health. Right? We saw this
Yes.
undercurrent of and hey, if you talk to someone, you get insight. And you have someone to talk to and share these. You express. You're able
Yeah.
to move unhealthy or harmful emotions in a different type of way. And so we start doing this at scale, we're going to create a healthier population. And then COVID happened, right?
Right.
And it was like, and you remember our conversations at that point. We're all sitting in Zoom rooms around the world. Everyone's isolated. It's like, why are we here? We had that collective 7-year-old moment. Why am
That's
I
right.
here?
Right.
What we're doing? Does it really matter? What's most important? What do I value? All of a sudden, we're all asking these questions, and everybody got different answers. And
Yeah.
everyone had that shared experience of like, maybe I should rewrite what I'm doing. Maybe I can do something different, or maybe I'm going to try something different. Everybody was open to a paradigm shift, and so
Totally.
it was the exact right moment for LifeGuides to come into the collective world, because now technology's evolved 3 years later, where the technology vision that we had of how artificial intelligence can connect and build depth of humanity, depth of empathy, depth of connection, more efficient sharing is happening right in front
Yeah.
of us,
I
right?
love
And
it.
so,
Yeah.
yeah,
I
that's
love.
to your question, but gives you the sense.
Oh, it's a really great sense. And if I go back to when you were at this Peter Diamandis like Abundance 360 and trying to figure out, all right, technology is going to continue to evolve, AI, quantum, like all of that
Yeah.
is happening. I agree with you. I've always said that the newest innovation in tech is humanity.
Yes.
Period. right? And how that is always going to require um, connectivity,
Yeah.
and technology can help enable that, but nothing substitutes a tech enabled connection than with that human feeling, right?
Yes.
And so I love that you went down that route. And what's interesting is that you talk about, all right, it's like a friend.
Yes.
So I'll say a peer, but someone who's actually gone through an experience that you are now going through,
Correct.
right? And so how do you find those people? Like, and how do they become qualified to
Yeah.
become a peer so
Yeah.
that, if I recently went through, I'm going through this right now where I'm in the sandwich generation. We have adult
Mm.
children. I have elderly parents. My dad passed away.
Mm.
And what was really helpful for me, although it wasn't enabled through technology, but just enabled through my network, like, I am going through this. What
Yes.
should I be thinking about? And it was super helpful that people can actually empathize with
Yes.
me, the feeling of it, beyond just here's a checklist of things you need to do. So,
Yes.
anyway, going back to how have you identified these peers, these
Yeah.
mentors?
So to your point, we call them guides, right?
Okay,
That's
guides.
life guides. That we call them guides, right? Because they're guiding you on your path. I'll come back to that question and answer in just one
Okay.
second. I want to acknowledge something else that you said. You know, look at this conversation we're having, right? We're
Yeah,
having a deep conversation about life and about purpose and
that's
about
right.
relationships via a video chat. This would never have happened 4 years ago, right? And the opportunity that 1,000 people theoretically could sit and watch our conversation right
Yeah,
now in real time is in and of itself what we're talking about, right? People are literally gaining exposure to new ideas through this conversation that we're having in this
yeah,
moment. It's pretty wild. So coming back to your question about
that's
guides,
right.
right? Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
it's super
fascinating.
wild.
I'm
Yeah,
sitting in Phoenix, Arizona, and you're sitting in Nashville, Tennessee, and we're
that's right.
sitting in the same room, right?
That's right.
Literally. So, from a guide standpoint, when we first launched it, we started with this topic of dementia caregiving, and the idea that, hey, and that's a really fascinating use case, if you will, or a scenario, because it has so many different stages of that process, and the identity being a caregiver, the provision of care, the challenges that come with working with a loved one who's going through that progression, right, and how that affects that
Yeah,
individual, how it affects the family, right, how it affects finances, how it affects the healthcare system. There's so many layers to that, right? So it was a very good kind of validation point. Like, is there something here? Is there a value exchange here? And more importantly, is there both a supply and demand? Like, do people want to share their experiences
yeah,
as guides? And is there value received as a member from a guide in doing that? And we proved out the answer was clearly yes, right? And then to your question, we started to find topics that were similar. And we
yeah,
started just recruiting guides from those areas, right? So if you've been a caregiver and you want to share your experience, come talk to us about being a guide. If you've been through a divorce and you're now in a happy, thriving marriage, or you created your life anew and you're thriving in it, and you want to be able to be a sounding board for someone going through a divorce, come talk to us. If you become a new parent and you're trying to figure it
yeah,
out and you want to talk to someone who has teenagers that are doing great, come talk to them about that experience, right? If you've transitioned from being an active military service member or man or woman, to being a veteran, and you want to talk to a veteran, come do that, right? And so we just started finding these organizations or groups and recruiting that people in to share
yeah.
their stories and experiences. And what we found all the time was that there was an abundance of people who wanted to share their experiences in
Amazing.
volunteer service, which to me is one of the coolest parts about this whole business. It's one of the things that makes me most, and it's more than just the business, but it's one of the things that makes me more optimistic about humanity, is there's such a latent potential of people, group of people that want to just help other people. They
Yeah,
want to share their story and try to pay it forward. And we've created a framework around how to do that well, and to do it where there's a fair exchange of value taking place,
yeah,
right? Equally in education and community and healing, whatever you want to call it, right? And we're creating this whole new category of support and modernizing what's always existed since the onset of community. We're
right.
just bringing it into modernization of it,
That's
right?
right. You're creating, well, it's kind of like what you said with technology. Like right
Yeah,
now, theoretically, 1,000 people could be in the room with us right now. And we weren't doing this 4 years ago.
right.
And so the fact that and I love that you are endorsed by the founder of Match.com.
Yeah,
Like how you're actually giving access to people to share those experiences, I think is really cool. And
Yes.
I guess that's my question too. Like, if I wanted a life guide,
Yeah.
do I need to be an employee at a company
Yeah.
or, to get access to life guide? Like, how do you go to market and how do
Yeah.
people
So
access it?
on a simple level, yes. Or this present moment, yes.
Okay.
As a employee or a family member who's over at the age of 18 at one of our client partners, and we work with many organizations, large and small.
Yeah.
If you are an employee of that, or you're part of their, a benefits package they offer, you would have access to the life guides,
Got it.
and it would be paid for by your employee. It would be free, right? Like it's not, you're not,
Amazing.
so it's a value that's there to be used, right? And so if you were to go to see a therapist, for example, you're going to pay $100 a session. This is a completely free service that employees can use courtesy of their employer at this time. And to your question, as we continue to reach more and more critical mass of the members that
Yeah.
we serve, right, then we'll have access to anyone, frankly.
Yeah.
We're already looking at how we do that through, traditional models of healthcare access or associations or different things of that nature to direct to consumer. And we're already starting to test some of those approaches, right?
Amazing.
Yeah.
And then I'm sure that your team and your research folks also understand this. The difference between the life guide,
Yeah.
so I'd say this peer-to-peer mentoring life guide versus traditional teletherapy. I'm
Yes.
calling it traditional teletherapy, like that's new too. But
Right. It is.
right?
Isn't that
But
amazing?
like, what is the difference? For people learning about this right now, the difference
Yes.
between therapy, like clinical mental health, versus this.
Yes. Well, first off, it's important to say we're not therapists. We're
Yeah.
not clinicians. We're not providing medical advice. We're not providing treatment. We're not doing things that would be in that space. It's a very clear distinction, and we've built a framework to help work with therapeutic options and other services that provide credentialed, licensed support in that way, right? And that's important to make that distinction.
Yeah.
So two things on that. So one, we do have individuals on our platform who are educated as physicians or psychiatrists or social workers or lawyers or different expertise, but they're not providing that professional service through our platform. They're showing up as human beings
Got it.
first and foremost, and that just happens to be a richness of their human experience, that they have those experience, that they've obtained that educational experience, right? And that you have the value to choose that guide, for example, from that experience, right? So that's one thing to mention. But where it differs is that our model fundamentally is about helping that person in the line or the video call find their own answers. We're asking questions. We're connecting with that person deeply. We're helping them find their own truths and to share, hey, in my experience, I tried these things, it worked great, or these are things that I wish I had known then.
Yeah.
Right? Maybe you want to be aware of it. Here's websites or pages that you might want to take a look at. And they're really just there to help facilitate and prompt, right? Whereas opposed to a therapist, there's a very clear model,
Sure.
models for how you provide therapy, and then also how treatment is prescribed, either from a medical standpoint or elsewhere in the system. So I say all that because we know that a lot of people, and we've seen this especially now in the healthcare system, it's being overwhelmed. You can't get good therapy often right now, even through digital therapy apps or through, brick and mortar therapy. So what we're doing is we're creating a whole model, and think about back to pre-pandemic, the whole stigma around therapy and medical care. People didn't want to use it for that exact reason. It was something wrong, or it was there was an issue there. So what we created was, hey, just talk to someone else who's been in your situation. It's not about your mental state. It's not you need a clinical support intervention. You just need to talk it out. You just need to be seen. You just need to be heard. Just be acknowledged. You just need to know it's okay. You need to have some hope. You need to know someone you can talk to and you can trust. And that's what a guide does. That's what a friend does. Yeah. But the benefit is that they themselves know this situation.
That's right.
They've been in it. And so there's another level of kind of trust and connection that's formed in that, right?
Yeah, I love that. And I agree with you. I think there's so much I have to react to. Going back to the conversation when we talked about definition of culture, and it really is about that clarity about who you are, what you value, what's important to you, me, as an individual. I love that the guide is not a therapist where there's a there is a way, and then there's a diagnosis and whatever they need to do to get there to the next level. But it is about helping to bring clarity
Yes.
on two things. One is, here's an experience, here's how I experienced it. They might experience it differently, but then it's a way of actually asking questions to others to help
Yes.
them find the answers that they probably already have within, right? They
Yes.
probably already have in their gut. All right, I'm thinking of how I might handle this situation, but a way that can help me guide my decision, right, is to talk to people who've had that experience and a
Yes.
trusted, safe environment. And
Yes.
so I love that. It goes back to, is this a terminology? Kind of self culture, right? Like
Yeah.
clear values or clear individual
Oh my God.
values.
Those are our literally, so our core values at
Yeah.
LifeGuides are legitimately clear. They are the clear values. That's what our core values spell.
No
They
way,
stand
that's
for.
right. Oh
Yes.
my gosh, but it is clarity, right? Like providing clarity. And by the way, I love that one of your values is love.
Yes.
Period. Hence why I wore my heart shirt. And anytime I have a conversation with you, that I am also joining your cause to be a rebel with a heart,
Yes. Yes.
right? Anyway, so I love that idea. And then I want you to comment on, you made me think about this too, mental health
Yes.
versus emotional health,
Yes.
right? So right now, I think headlines,
Yeah.
as everyone talks about, all right, how we've all come back from this last pandemic, the first pandemic we had, and how we come together and work together, and the state of mental health for
Yes.
people. Now, I'd love your take on, I like broadening that definition to overall well being and
Yes.
emotional well being. So, say more about that. I mean, I'd love to get your take on it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you tap right into it, right? So well-being or health broadly is really, or holistic wholeness, right? Is
Yeah.
really what we're aiming for. And that consists of multiple elements: mental health, emotional health, physiological health, spiritual health, financial health, social health. I mean, there are these different components that make up health, right? And make up well-being. And that's what we're striving for together, individually and as a group. That's possible. We can
Yeah.
create that in and outside of the workplace, right? And so that's really what we're talking about when we think about well-being, is how do you be well? How do you live well?
Yeah.
How do you foster that in your team? And we know that it's all systemic, it's all interrelated, right?
Yep.
You know that one influences the other, right? Your physiology influences your mental and emotional health. Your mental and emotional health influences how you show up with your friends and your family, right? And so they're not, it's not enough to just focus on one piece. You
I
need to look at
agree.
the entirety. And we are not just linear people. We're complex individuals with different elements, different things, and it moves fluidly, right? And so providing, again, the guide that can help in those situations and move with you, an accountability partner in your health and fitness, someone to talk to about what's going on in your relationship, someone to talk to you about how you're going through your caregiving process. You can have guides for different
Got it.
topics, right? As an example. And then coming back for a second, because we've talked a lot about, back to the helping a billion people thrive,
Yeah.
reduce back to that idea. It's not just about being the recipient, right? There's a tremendous amount of value and health that takes place in being the guide, right? There's another
Yeah.
layer of when you can teach someone, when you can demonstrate that you've mastered something, is it more of a layer of
Yes.
release and healing that takes place. And then you're being of service, right? And you're multiplying the value, and you're exchanging that you're redeeming that energy, for lack of a better term, right? To
Right.
creating everybody. And so that's how we create health. I'm getting really good goosebumps as we're talking about this, because it really is changing. Like, you're exchanging people to upgrade on the whole.
Yeah.
Right? So
Well,
that's
I take it a step further. I think about, it's not just when I see your big vision of like impacting a billion people,
yeah,
and it's not just about the life guide and then the recipient. I think as a result, they both become better people, and then they become better people to the people around them.
bingo.
And so that, I mean, it's that broadly that I think about it, and especially in today's world, right? We're going into another election in the U.S. India is going to go through yet another one, and just the level of agita that
Yeah,
exists with people coexisting in a workplace, whether it's a virtual workplace or physical workplace. Yikes, right? Again, it goes back to that self-awareness and that self-monitoring and that uh, level of clarity that
Yes.
people have about themselves before they realize how they're impacting others. And
Mhm.
so I think it's a really cool idea that, especially now, I love talking about kindness,
Mm.
but I think it's that good energy,
Yeah.
which is if you're feeling that as a result of an interaction, right? Whether you're the guide or the recipient, their hearts become full again. Their cup
Yes.
remains full again, right? And then they're able to bring that to others.
Yes.
Maybe it's not even a billion people. Maybe it's more than that.
I,
It's like,
I'm
dude,
so
come
happy
on.
you said that because we always say, hey, we're just looking for that's our achievable metric. Because technically, you're right. It could be everyone in the world,
Right.
theoretically, right?
Right.
Theoretically, it could be,
Yeah.
right?
Although
So,
we know that we're not there yet. How
exactly.
we know we're not there yet. Why? Because look, a couple weeks ago I had the chance to join some amazing leaders on stage at the Sherman Inclusion
Yeah.
Conference. The topic was how do you turn incivility into inclusion,
Yes.
right? And I think the work, as much as there's broader company work that DEI professionals can do, it starts with you, right?
Yes.
It's like it starts with you. And again, I'm still going to go back to Ice Cube. Check yourself before you wreck yourself. Like, understand that,
I love it.
period.
Yes.
I know, laugh. I'm old school, but it's so true. Um, I want to get into metrics too. So I know you talked about, all right, a billion is a way that you can measure the impact.
Yeah.
How are you helping your clients, your
Yeah.
companies measure impact on their cultures?
So yes, great. Two parts to that. One, you mentioned Sherm, right? They're actually, and you were there. They're one of our partners, actually, one of our client partners, and we're working with them on building a research study, multi-year research study, to measure the impact of
Okay.
cultures across industries, across verticals, across certain client types. So that's one thing I'll just share. We're building that. That's part of the plan, if you will, right? But then on an individual level, it's important to measure both cultural effect, right? So how the perception of that culture is, how it affects employee, engagement,
Yeah.
how it affects employee retention. I don't like to use that word, but how employees choose where they choose to spend their employee time,
Hmm.
right? Is a part of that, right? And the way they show up to be most productive, and also how they show up for their families, right? Outside of
Right.
work, it's a an exchange is taking place, an agreement is taking place between employees and employers. And so, how do we upgrade those relationships? And then also, how do we provide support for managers and leaders to make sure that
Yeah.
they are equipped? They don't. Not everyone has the unique experience that someone has, but they now have a reinforcement to say, "Hey, I care, and I have this offering for
That's
you
right.
to help us to understand each other better, to give you the support you need, and we can support each other." And so it goes back to operationalizing compassion and operationalizing that culture of caring, right? And so the need to provide personalized support, that's what we're doing, as everybody's situation is different in that moment. And so and then we're also working to measure business outcomes, right?
Yep.
How do we reduce risk? How do we reduce, back to our conversation, how do we reduce mental health claims? How do we
That's
make
right.
sure that people are getting the right resources when they need them? How do they utilize the services and benefits that companies invest in and make sure that they're aware of them at the right moment? So, because a lot of times, for example, you gave the example of losing a loved one, right?
Yeah.
Recently, if you don't know that someone offers you support in that way, you're not gonna use it. But if someone's talking to you about it, say, oh, by the way, this company has this available to you, you're gonna use it in that right moment, because there's a different moment when it's in a conversation
That's right.
versus when you're trying to search for it when you're feeling grief and you're feeling upset and you're thinking about what's going on, right? And so that's the human experience for all of us, truly.
Yeah, I love that. And you made me think about as you're in this process of measuring um, the role of the manager, right? So the role of the Hugh manager.
Yes.
I got that from my conversation with Erica Caswin. And I saw that
Nice.
she was on your
She's coming on
Rebels in the Rebels.
tomorrow on
Yeah, I
Rebels.
saw that she's coming on a
Yeah.
Rebels. Anyway, that's a new level of awareness. We're not asking managers today to be complete empaths,
Yes.
although it would be ideal if they were. I'm just
Yeah,
saying,
for sure.
right? But I think that's a new level of leadership and management that needs to be happening today, and understanding that, I mean, everyone has a unique experience. I saw that, Cecilia, hi Cecilia, she's watching us, but Cecilia was pointing out that people of color and women have experienced mental health and emotional well-being differently. There it is again. And how we need to address the systemic microaggressions impacting us. And I know that's a broader tactic or a broader strategy, but I think it still goes back to, and I love using this phrase, for leaders. I'll start with people who are responsible for people, right?
Yes.
Leaders or managers, that they have an awareness of how people experience you,
Boom.
period. Right? It starts at that individual level. And so I'm wondering if there's a coaching that you
Well,
provide, and I don't know, is there a
yes.
life guide that you can provide for managers who are newly managing people who now are bringing all of their emotional well-being, or not, to what they do in life?
So the simple answer is yes. It's actually
Okay.
part of our package. We built a
It
whole.
is.
Yes. So when clients buy LifeGuides, they also have access to our LifeGuides for Leaders framework and our empathetic
Stop
leadership
it.
framework system. And we include all of that. And it's developed by neuroscientists and psychologists and human empathy experts. And we provide that as part of our onboarding to our clients.
Human empathy experts. I love that. Um, you also were talking about the partnership with SHRM, and I saw your announcement a couple months ago on
Yes.
this Social Impact Council. So
Yeah.
what's that?
So Johnny, you mentioned, so you were probably with him because I know this topic of civility is one that he's very passionate about.
Yeah,
So Johnny is the chairman of our Social Impact Council, and he's the CEO of SHRM for those that don't know. And Johnny, so SHRM was a client, or is a client, and he heard about LifeGuides and said, I get it. I see what this is and how what you're doing, and I want to play an active role in this because it's aligned with my mission around talent and around mobility and around access and around belonging and around all
yeah,
these different topics. And the core concept of the Social Impact Council is recognizing when you synergize different initiatives from private and public organizations, right?
yeah.
Let's just talk specifically, right? Right now, what's going on in the Middle East, and
That's
that
right.
people are being affected directly, indirectly, no matter where you are on your perspective on that conflict, people are struggling and suffering, right? And the opportunity to connect resources, financial resources, human resource, people, stories, access exists. And so for our ability in the long run to connect money with organizations, with people who can be guides, with
Yeah,
those who need guidance in times of struggle and crisis that couldn't otherwise afford it, or need to be provided to it by their community or by organizations that are influential in their communities. That's what the Social Impact Council is really designed to do, right? And that's going back to when you talk about billions of people around the world,
yes.
right? That's part of how we achieve that, right? Is tapping into that, and we're in the early stages of building that
I
vision.
love that. So it's really creating this global network
Yeah.
of humans, right?
Yes.
Like of humans who care
Yes.
about what people are
Bingo.
experiencing.
That's
Amazing.
exactly what it is.
Oh my goodness. I would love to try and get some advice from you. There's so many questions,
Yeah.
but I think from a culture standpoint, a lot of people who tend to join these culture cast conversations are just looking for kernels of, all right, you're blowing my mind, on this whole idea of life guides and how it came about. But if there is a small executable step, I think about change happens when, right? It's not going to happen overnight, and it's not linear, but
Yes.
it's when you can actually digest it into the smallest executable step and learn from that. What advice would you give to folks who are listening to this right now or will listen later on how they can help others thrive?
Yeah. So I wouldn't necessarily call it advice, but I'll give this. I'll
Okay.
share two things that you kind of already mirrored back in this. Right? Is that we each have stories, we each have experiences, we each have contributing factors that make our experience of life uniquely ours. And that in and of itself, that small piece is a gift for all of us to share, right? That kernel,
Yeah.
we each have kernels, or we have lots of them that can be shared, right? They all seed one another. And so, to your point, the ability for us to sit in stillness, in presence, in awareness of those moments, in those gifts, in those opportunities, that's part of what we're all here doing together, right? No matter how you look at it, in the
Yeah.
workplace, outside the workplace, with our colleagues, with our families, with our friends. That's fundamentally what makes us human beings. And there's an opportunity for all of us to show up and serve and contribute in that way, and as much as people are inspired to do so. And it doesn't have to be on the LifeGuides platform. It's just
Right.
how you show up. It's how you live,
That's
right?
right.
And it's recognizing that each of us can live that way
Yeah.
every moment if we so choose.
Yeah, I love that. I think if I were to just summarize, and I know it's not advice, but I think it's a way of being. And what I'm hearing you say is a way to help others thrive is really to be present,
Yes.
right? Be present with that human being in front of you, whether it's virtual, like you and I are virtual right now, or in the moment when you're around another person.
Yes.
And you never know the gift that you might be giving because of the unique experience that they might be going through. Like
Yes.
it's being present enough to understand, what's beyond the surface, I guess, is what you're saying. And to do that for others. And I think what I've heard you say consistently too in our conversation is it's being of service to others. It's
Yes.
about serving others, service leadership, that it's like not what can you do for me, but what can I be doing for you?
Yes.
And like being curious enough to, I love you said this too, sit in stillness to really see that.
Mhm. Thank you.
I
Thank you.
mean, yes, I am signing up for all of those things because I feel like it's a way of being. Now, I do want to jump into, since we do talk about culture, I
Yeah.
want to get into pop culture a little bit.
Sure.
So, what are you into these days in terms of like, what are you eating? What are you reading? What are you
Yeah.
watching? What are you listening to? Like, what's your fave lately?
Okay.
Faves lately?
So it's a loaded question. So I have three. I have three young children, as you know, right? So I have a
Yes.
soon to be 6-year-old daughter, and I have two boys who are 4 and 2, right? And so a lot of what I love is that everything for them is new right now, right? And so
Oh, yeah.
we're talking about Halloween, and just like they're
Yeah.
coming aware of of movies and characters and Disney movies and Marvel and all that stuff. So I love watching them try these things and see these things for the first time, because it's back to presence. It's the epitome of like they're just immersed in all this, right? So I
Yeah.
really just love pouring in and experiencing with my kids what they're experiencing for the first time. Um, Personally, with what I'm doing, so I've been doing this intermittent fasting thing for a couple of years, which has been good, really good for me.
Oh my God, I'm new on that journey. Say more about that. I'm gonna keep going.
I've been into the wearables thing. So back to data, right? So I've been
Okay.
wearing my Whoop and my Aura ring now for almost 2.5 years, and I've been doing the intermittent fasting thing. So I only eat basically between 10 and 6 or noon and 8 if I'm traveling typically, and so then I don't eat the rest of the time.
Yeah.
So I basically now eat about 2 meals a day, and I have found it's been amazing for my energy, for my sleep, for just my overall physiology, and that's a big part, as you know, for how you show up in that way. So that's something that I've been doing. And then, again, just it's experiencing things with my family. And we were talking about different things we want to do, and just trying exposing to different kinds of music, to different kinds of media, different types of adventures. We love to get outside right now, so we do a lot of time in the pool and doing hiking,
That's amazing.
and a lot of time in nature. And then as far as some of the stuff I'm reading, I mean, so I just ordered. It hasn't arrived yet, but if you know Ron Shaich, and you probably do because
Yep.
you live in this world, Ron had been the founder of Panera. He just wrote a book called Know What Matters.
Yeah.
He's part of I had the opportunity to meet Ron years ago, so I'm looking forward to reading that book. It's released next week, so I'll have that on pre.
Ooh.
And that goes back to that question, like why, right? And I'm excited to hear and see what he has to say about that. And another book on my desk here, Human Beings First by Paul Wolfe, which was gifted to me. That's on my next one to read. I'm also reading every day right now, The Daily Stoic by Ryan Holiday. So that's something else I've been reading. So those are just a few things that I've been been reading and watching and participating.
Oh my gosh, we will make sure we capture all that in the show notes so that people can recap that. If not, just rewind and hear all your wise wisdom. Um, Intermittent fasting, completely new to me. And it sounds like you have this 8-hour eating window.
Yeah.
I'm still trying to go with 12 hours.
Okay.
So, but I think it's baby steps, right? And I'm
Yes.
already feeling the difference. It's only been, I'm so new. It's coming up on 2 weeks
Okay.
of learning about it and just trying that 12-hour
Yeah.
of fasting and then having that eating window. I think
Yes.
that 8 hours is really what I'm striving towards in the next month is what I'm hoping.
Yeah.
Right. And
Well,
I'm gonna
and
just
Erin, my wife, right? She's done it. She does also a longer window. She tried to. It actually worked better for her having a longer window.
yeah.
So in terms of, I don't know if there's a physiological difference between men and women, but
There is.
yeah,
Yeah, I'm sure there is. So yeah, I'm interested in how that will impact. And I'm already seeing a difference in terms of just sleep,
yeah,
energy, although I always have a lot of energy. I
you
just
do.
say boundless energy, right? It's kind of like, okay, now I'm ready to go and I'm not hungry. And then I actually force myself to like, all right, do I need to take that to 11 hours, right? In terms of an 11-hour eating window. Anyway, I know we're coming up to the top of the hour.
Well,
I
we could
wish
do this. We should
I
do
know
this.
I was gonna say, can
Yeah.
we just do this every week and just hang out? I love this. I feel like
Yes.
when we met, and I know it was through my husband Michael. It's the first time that we had spent time together. It just felt akin. And I think
Yeah.
about I won't say what company, but as I was growing up in my career, I remember trying to get developmental feedback from a leader who, I don't know, he made a difference between how men and women show assertiveness in the workplace. And he said to me, he goes, "This is a good thing for you, but maybe not a good thing for you as a leader."
Mm.
Is that he goes, "You wear your heart on your sleeve, you lead with your heart." And I'm like, say more about that. And he just kind of said, if you want to be a leader in the company, and I know that I ascended to a leader in the company, I'll just say a C suite level role, I think it's because I led with my heart.
Yeah.
And it's just reminding me this conversation is leading with your heart is being human, right?
Yeah.
And it's recognizing that in others, that it's not about this persona to become a leader. I think
Oh
even
man,
today,
so good about that.
right? It's about the leaders who are successful today. I feel like I'm being preachy right now. Really demonstrate that empathy. It's going to go back to that,
Yeah.
right? Who have that empathy and at least seek to understand where others are coming from.
And I'll just echo that, agree with you. That was the entire basis of Rebels with a Heart, right? The founding of that, you mentioned Rebels with a Heart.
Yes.
The whole concept of that, when
Yes.
we launched it pre-COVID, was that was the way of leading in the future. Like that intelligence existed, in the organization, and it's a force rising in this next chapter of leadership in business, in life,
Agreed.
communities. And those rebels with a heart are stepping into C-suite roles and positions of influence and positions of cultural influence. And that's exactly what's going on, Lisa. So I completely, wholeheartedly agree with what you said.
Oh my goodness, what a sweet way to end this conversation. Derek, how can people find you? Just,
Uh,
how can they
yes.
reach you?
Personally, my email is Derek, DEREK, at lifeguides.com. I'm also on all the social media channels. You can find me on LinkedIn and all the other places, but I'm definitely LinkedIn active. The
Right
most
on.
professional, but you can find me everywhere. And then again, my email, you can reach out anytime. But Maurice, this was always, as always, love talking with you. This
Oh
was
my gosh. Can I just say I heart you?
yes, likewise.
Or heart you with
Yeah.
whatever I'm wearing. Um, Dude, thank you so much.
Yeah.
And I think
Love
there's much love hanging out here in the comments. So good to see some of you. Again, the fans who are also rebels with a heart, who are leading it in their organization. So thank you, everybody. And until next time, ciao. And I heart you. All right. Take care.